As we delve into the world of medieval Europe, it's impossible not to wonder what life was like for those who lived and breathed behind the grand facades of wealthy households. For centuries, servants played a vital role in maintaining the intricate web of power and status that defined the medieval class system. In this video, we'll be exploring what it was like to be a servant in a rich medieval household, and I'll be sharing some fascinating insights that you might not know. Growing up, I've always been fascinated by history, and I spent countless hours poring over dusty tomes in my local library. But it wasn't until I stumbled upon a medieval reenactment event that I truly caught the imagination of what life must have been like for those who lived and served in such grand estates. The costumes, the music, the food, everything seemed to transport me to another world, a world that was both familiar and yet utterly foreign. As I began to dig deeper into the world of medieval servants, I realized just how little we know about their lives. We hear so much about the nobles and the royalty, but what about the people who actually kept their households running? Who cooked their meals, cleaned their chambers, and ensured their clothes were spotless? These individuals were the backbone of medieval society, and yet they remain one of the most overlooked and underappreciated groups of people in history. In this video, we'll be exploring the world of medieval servants through a unique lens, the lens of personal experience. We'll be sharing stories of what it was like to live and work in a rich medieval household, from the lowest servant to the highest-ranking lady-in-waiting. We'll explore the daily routines, the social hierarchies, and the countless tasks that made up the life of a medieval servant. So, if you're ready to step into the world of medieval Europe and experience the lives of those who lived and breathed behind the grand facade, one of the most challenging aspects of being a medieval servant was the lack of autonomy and freedom. They were bound to the household, and their every move was watched and controlled by the family. They were not allowed to leave the premises without permission, and even then, it was only to run errands or perform specific tasks. The family's word was law, and servants had to obey without question. But despite the hardships and challenges, servants found ways to cope and even thrive in their roles. They would often form close bonds with each other, sharing stories, laughter, and secrets. They would also find ways to make their work more enjoyable, such as singing while they worked or playing games during their brief breaks. As we explore the daily life of a medieval servant, it's clear that their role was far more complex and multifaceted than we often imagine. From the physical labor to the lack of autonomy, servants faced numerous challenges that would be difficult for us to comprehend today. But amidst the hardships, they also found moments of joy, connection, and resilience. In the next section, we'll delve deeper into the social hierarchy of a medieval household and explore the roles and responsibilities of different servants. Section 3. The daily life of a medieval servant. As a medieval servant, life was far from easy. You'd wake up before dawn to start your day, and it would be a long, grueling routine that left you exhausted by the end of it. I've heard stories from historians about what a typical day in the life of a medieval servant looked like, and it's truly eye-opening. Imagine rising before the sun, when the household was still asleep, and the only sound you could hear was the wind rustling through the trees outside. You'd quickly get dressed in the dark, using the candles that were left burning from the previous night, and head down to the kitchen to start your chores. These would include tasks like feeding the animals, gathering firewood, and preparing breakfast for the family. One of the most interesting things I've learned about in the next section, we'll be exploring the social hierarchy of a medieval household and how servants fit into that hierarchy. We'll be looking at the different roles and responsibilities of different servants and how they interacted with each other and with their masters. This will give us a deeper understanding of what life was like for medieval servants and how they navigated the complex social dynamics of their households. Section 4. The daily life of a servant. As we delve deeper into the lives of medieval servants, it's essential to understand what a typical day looked like for them. Imagine waking up before dawn, with the sound of the castle's bell tolling in the distance, signaling the start of another long day. Our medieval servant, let's call her Emma, would have risen from her narrow bed in the servants' quarters, a small room above the kitchen, shared with several other servants. Emma's day began with a quick wash with cold water from the castle's well, and a hasty breakfast of bread and perhaps some cheese or porridge. With her chores for the day, she would have to be quick and efficient, as the lord and lady of the manor had little patience for tardiness. Emma's tasks varied depending on her position, but as a general servant, she would have been responsible for helping with the cooking, cleaning, and laundry. One of the most demanding tasks for Emma would have been the laundry. Medieval washing machines didn't exist, and the process of washing, rinsing, and wringing out clothes by hand was backbreaking work. Emma would have had to gather water from the well, heat it over the fire, and then scrub the clothes by hand before rinsing and hanging them out to dry. This process could take several hours, especially on large days like laundry day. In contrast to laundry day, Emma's work on a typical day was more varied. She might have spent the morning helping with the cooking, preparing meals for the lord and lady, as well as their guests. This involved chopping vegetables, stirring pots, and plucking chickens from the castle's coop. Emma's duties would have been dictated by the time of year and the lord's preferences, but she would have had to be flexible and adaptable to changing circumstances. The afternoon might have been spent on more mundane tasks, like sweeping the floors, dusting the furniture, or cleaning the lord's chambers. Emma would have had to navigate the labyrinthine corridors of the castle, avoiding the lord's servants, who were often better paid and held higher status than the general servants like Emma. It's a testament to Emma's resourcefulness and determination that she managed to navigate these complex relationships and perform her duties to the best of her ability. As the day drew to a close, Emma would have had a brief respite, perhaps sharing a meal with her fellow servants or taking a short walk in the castle's gardens. However, her work wasn't done yet. As the evening drew in, Emma would have had to help with the final preparations for dinner, perhaps serving the lord and lady, and then cleaning up afterwards. It's worth noting that Emma's life wasn't all drudgery and hard work. She would have had the opportunity to learn new skills like cooking, sewing, or even music. Many servants were trained in these areas, which could enhance their chances of finding better-paying positions when they left the castle. Emma's relationships with her fellow servants were also important, as they provided a sense of community and support in the often isolation of the castle. In the next section, we'll explore the social hierarchy of the medieval household and how Emma's position fit into that structure. We'll examine the roles of the lord, lady, and their servants, and how they interacted with one another. This will give us a deeper understanding of the complex dynamics at play in the medieval household, and how they affected the lives of servants like Emma. Here's section 5 of the comprehensive script for the YouTube video, What It Was Like to Be a Servant in a Rich Medieval Household. Section 5, Servant Hierarchies and Roles. Imagine waking up every morning in a cold, dark attic room, with nothing but a straw mattress and a rusty iron bed frame to call your own. This was the reality for many medieval servants, who toiled for hours on end in the grand estates of Europe's nobility. But what was it like to be a servant in a rich medieval household? In this section, we'll delve into the complex hierarchies and roles that define the lives of these unsung heroes. At the very top of the servant hierarchy were the chamberlains, who oversaw the entire household staff and reported directly to the lord or lady of the manor. Chamberlains were responsible for managing the household's finances, coordinating events and celebrations, and ensuring that the estate ran smoothly. They were often highly educated and skilled in diplomacy, which made them invaluable assets to their employers. Below the chamberlains were the steward, who managed the estate's agricultural and livestock operations. Stewards were responsible for overseeing the planting, harvesting, and storage of crops, as well as the breeding and care of livestock. They also played a crucial role in maintaining the estate's infrastructure, including buildings, roads, and bridges. Stewards were often experts in agriculture and were responsible for advising the lord or lady on matters related to the estate's productivity. The next level of the servant hierarchy consisted of the cooks, who were responsible for preparing meals for the lord, lady, and their guests. Cooks were highly skilled in the art of food preparation and were often responsible for creating elaborate feasts and banquets. They worked long hours in the kitchen, often from dawn till dusk, to ensure that the family's meals were prepared to perfection. Other key roles within the servant hierarchy included the chambermaids, who were responsible for cleaning and maintaining the lord's and ladies' chambers. Chambermaids were skilled in the art of laundry, needlework, and other domestic tasks, and were often responsible for creating intricate embroidery and tapestries. But what about the servants' daily life? What were their working conditions like? And how did they interact with their employers? To answer these questions, let's take a closer look at the daily routines of a medieval servant. One of the most famous accounts of a medieval servant's life comes from the writings of a 14th-century Englishman named William Langland. In his poem, Piers Plowman, Langland describes the harsh conditions faced by medieval servants, who worked long hours in the fields, often for little pay and with few breaks. Langland writes, "In every lord's house, there's a servant bound, by contract or by service, to work all day, from dawn till dusk, with no rest in between. Their work is never done. Their pay is always lean." Langland's account paints a vivid picture of the hardships faced by medieval servants, who worked tirelessly to keep the estates running. In the next section, we'll explore the complex relationships between servants and their employers and examine the roles that servants played in maintaining the social order of the time. We'll also take a closer look at the ways in which servants interacted with each other and how their relationships were shaped by the power dynamics of the household. So, let's move on to Section 6, Servant-Employer Relationships and Social Order. Section 6, the day-to-day life of a medieval servant. As we delve deeper into the world of medieval servitude, I want to take you with me on a journey through the daily life of a servant in a rich household. Imagine waking up before dawn, the air thick with the smell of wood smoke and cooking fires. Your day is about to begin, and it's going to be a long one. In medieval times, servants like you would have been responsible for a multitude of tasks, from cooking and cleaning to tending to the lord's gardens and livestock. Every task was essential to the smooth running of the household, and failure. In the next section, we'll be looking at the role of servants in medieval society, including their relationships with the lord and his family. We'll also be exploring the ways in which servants were treated and the laws that govern their lives. It's a fascinating topic, and one that will give you a deeper understanding of what it was like to be a servant in a rich medieval household. Section 7. Life in the Kitchen. The Unsung Heroes of Medieval Servitude. As we delve deeper into the world of medieval servitude, it's easy to get caught up in the grandeur of the castle and the opulence of the lord's lifestyle. But let's not forget the people who made it all possible: the servants, the cooks, the maids, and the scullery boys. They were the backbone of the household, toiling away in the kitchen, often from dawn till dusk. I've always been fascinated by the lives of these unsung heroes, and today, I want to share with you what it was like to be a servant in a rich medieval household. Specifically, let's talk about the kitchen staff who were responsible for preparing meals for the lord, his family, and his guests. Can you imagine being responsible for feeding a whole household, often with limited resources and no modern conveniences? One of the most interesting things about medieval kitchens is the social hierarchy that existed within them. At the top of the pyramid were the cooks and the head chefs, who were responsible for creating elaborate meals for special occasions. They were highly skilled and well-respected members of the household staff. Below them were the scullery boys and girls who were responsible for doing the heavy lifting literally. They would chop vegetables, wash dishes, and do all the menial tasks that kept the kitchen running smoothly. But what about the day-to-day life of these servants? What was it like to work in a medieval kitchen? Let me tell you a story. I've read accounts from servants who worked in medieval households, and one of the most striking things is the amount of work they did. They would rise with the sun, start cooking breakfast, and then work tirelessly throughout the day to prepare meals for the Lord and his guests. One servant, named Thomas, wrote about his experiences working in a medieval kitchen. He said, "I would start my day by gathering firewood and kindling. Then, I would stoke the fire and start cooking breakfast for the Lord and his family. I would make porridge, bread, and sometimes even eggs. It was hard work, but it was a privilege to serve the Lord and his family." As we can see from Thomas's account, being a servant in a medieval household was not easy. It was hard, physically demanding work, but it was also a source of pride and satisfaction. These servants took great pride in their work, knowing that they were responsible for feeding the Lord and his family. But what about the working conditions? Did these servants have any rights or protections? Unfortunately, in our next section, as we continue to explore what it was like to be a servant in a rich medieval household, let's dive deeper into the daily routine of a servant. Specifically, we'll be focusing on life in the Great Hall, the heart of the medieval home. This is where the family and their guests would gather for meals, entertainment, and socializing. As a servant, you would play a crucial role in making sure everything ran smoothly. Imagine waking up early in the morning, before the sun rises, to start your day. The first task of the day would be to help the cook prepare breakfast for the family and their guests. This could be anything from porridge to bread to meat pies. As a servant, you would be responsible for chopping vegetables, stirring pots, and generally helping to get the meal ready. You would also need to make sure the Great Hall is clean and tidy, with the tables set, the fire lit, and the silverware polished. But life in the Great Hall wasn't just about cooking and cleaning. It was also a place of socializing and entertainment. As a servant, you would be expected to attend to the needs of the guests, refilling their cups, serving them food, and generally making them feel welcome. This could be a challenging task, especially if you're serving a large group of people, but it was also an opportunity to learn about different cultures and ways of life. One of the things that's often overlooked when it comes to medieval life is the importance of music and entertainment. In the Great Hall, you would often find musicians playing the lute, harp, or recorder, while others would be performing acrobatics or juggling. As a servant, you might be called upon to join in the fun, either by playing an instrument yourself or by acting as a helper to the performers. So, what was it like to be a servant in a rich medieval household? It was a challenging but rewarding job that required you to be skilled in a variety of areas, from cooking and cleaning to entertainment and socializing. But it was also a unique opportunity to learn about different cultures and ways of life, and to be part of a vibrant and dynamic community. As we move forward in our exploration of medieval life, we'll be looking at other aspects of a servant's role, from laundry and linens to the importance of hierarchy and protocol. But for now, let's take a step back and imagine what it would be like to be a servant in the Great Hall, surrounded by the sights, sounds, and smells of a busy and bustling household. Section 10. Life as a Servant, the Unseen World of Medieval Household Staff. As we continue our journey through the lives of medieval servants, it's essential to understand the complex dynamics within a rich household. You see, a medieval household was not just a place of residence, but a thriving community with its own social hierarchy. Now, imagine being part of this intricate world, where every move you made was closely monitored, and your actions had a significant impact on the household's reputation. Life as a servant was far from easy, with long hours, meager wages, and limited social mobility. Yet, many people chose this path, often out of necessity, while others saw it as an opportunity to rise through the ranks and gain wealth and status. Take, for instance, the story of Thomas Chaucer, a medieval poet and the son of a Canterbury wine merchant. Thomas became the valet of King Edward III, rising through the ranks to become a prominent figure in court life. His experiences offer a unique insight into the world of medieval servants. Thomas's rise to prominence was not an isolated incident. In fact, many servants managed to secure positions of power and influence within the household. However, it's essential to remember that their success was often dependent on their ability to navigate the complex web of relationships within the household. You see, medieval servants were not just employees. They were also members of a community, bound together by shared experiences, social norms, and a sense of belonging. As we delve deeper into the lives of medieval servants, it's clear that their experiences were shaped by the social and economic context of the time. Take, for example, the impact of the Black Death on the servant class. With a significant decrease in the workforce, many servants found themselves in high demand, commanding higher wages and better working conditions. However, this shift also created new challenges, as households struggled to maintain their social status and reputation. In this section, we'll explore the intricacies of life as a medieval servant, examining the social hierarchies, relationships, and power dynamics within the household. We'll also look at the ways in which servants navigated this complex world, often relying on their wit, charm, and resourcefulness to succeed. By the end of this section, you'll have a deeper understanding of the unseen world of medieval household staff, and the ways in which they shaped the social and economic landscape of the time. One of the most significant factors influencing a servant's life was their position within the household's social hierarchy. At the top of the pyramid were the highest-ranking servants, often responsible for managing the household's finances, overseeing the staff, and advising the lord on matters of state. These individuals were typically well-educated, well-connected, and highly skilled in their profession. Below them were the middle-ranking servants, who performed a range of tasks, from cooking and cleaning to serving and attending to the lord's personal needs. In our next section, we'll delve into the world of medieval servant training, examining the ways in which young servants learned their trade and the skills they developed to succeed in this complex world. We'll also explore the role of education and social mobility in shaping the lives of medieval servants, and the ways in which they were able to rise through the ranks and gain wealth and status. Section 11. Life as a servant in a rich medieval household, the ups and downs. As we continue our journey into the world of medieval servitude, it's essential to understand the complexities of life in a rich household. While many of us might imagine servants living in luxury, the reality was far from it. In this section, we'll delve into the highs and lows of being a servant in a wealthy medieval estate and explore what it was like to live and work in such an environment. Imagine waking up before dawn every day, not knowing what tasks lay ahead, and working tirelessly until the sun dips below the horizon. This was the reality for many servants, who often had limited control over their daily routines and were at the mercy of their masters. However, it was also a time of great camaraderie and shared purpose, as servants relied on each other to get the work done. One of the most significant aspects of life as a servant in a rich medieval household was the hierarchical structure. At the top of the ladder were the senior servants, who held positions of authority and were often responsible for overseeing the daily operations of the estate. These individuals were typically well-respected and well-compensated, but they also had a great deal of responsibility and stress. Below the senior servants were the junior servants, who performed a wide range of tasks, from cooking and cleaning to maintenance and childcare. These individuals often had limited training and were expected to learn as they went, which could be a challenging and intimidating experience. However, They also had the opportunity to work their way up the ranks and gain more responsibility as they proved themselves. As a servant in a rich medieval household, you would have been expected to be versatile and skilled in a variety of areas. This might include cooking, cleaning, and laundry, as well as more specialized tasks such as hunting, fishing, or working with animals. You would have also been expected to be knowledgeable about the estate's operations, including its gardens, orchards, and livestock. Despite the challenges and difficulties, life as a servant in a rich medieval household had its rewards. Many servants were able to earn a steady income, which was a rare commodity in medieval times. They were also part of a tight-knit community, where everyone worked together to achieve a common goal. And, of course, there was the opportunity to work for a wealthy and influential family, which could provide access to education, training, and other opportunities that might not have been available elsewhere. However, life as a servant in a rich medieval household was not without its downsides. Servants were often treated poorly and were subject to physical and emotional abuse. They were also expected to be on call 24/7 and were often called upon to perform tasks at short notice. This could be exhausting and demoralizing, especially for those who were not well-rested or well-fed. In addition to the physical and emotional demands of the job, life as a servant in a rich medieval household also came with significant social pressures. Servants were often expected to conform to certain standards of behavior and dress, and were subject to strict rules and regulations. This could be difficult for those who were not used to living in a hierarchical society, and could lead to feelings of frustration and resentment. So, what can we learn from the experiences of servants in rich medieval households? For one thing, we can gain a deeper understanding of the social and economic structures of the time. We can also learn about the importance of hard work, teamwork, and adaptability in achieving success. And, of course, we can gain a greater appreciation for the people who worked hard to keep our ancestors' lives running smoothly. In the next section, we'll continue our exploration of life as a servant in a rich medieval household and examine the role of servants in medieval society. We'll also explore the ways in which the experiences of servants reflect the broader social and economic trends of the time. Stay tuned for more insights into the fascinating world of medieval servitude. Section 12. Life as a servant in a medieval household, the unseen struggles. As we continue our journey into the lives of medieval servants, let's take a closer look at the daily struggles and hardships they faced within the walls of a rich household. Imagine waking up before dawn, with the sound of clanging pots and pans echoing through the corridors, signaling the start of another long day. This is the reality that medieval servants lived in, and it's essential to understand the depth of their struggles to truly appreciate the sacrifices they made. One of the most significant challenges faced by medieval servants was the grueling work schedule. Servants were expected to work for up to 18 hours a day, with little to no rest in between. From scrubbing floors to serving meals, their days were filled with an endless list of chores. And it wasn't just the physical labor that took a toll. The mental strain of being constantly watched and judged by their masters and mistresses was equally exhausting. The slightest mistake could result in punishment, making the servants live in a state of constant anxiety. Now, you might be wondering, what about the food? Did medieval servants at least have access to a decent meal? Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. Servants often had to make do with meager rations, which consisted of stale bread, thin broth, and perhaps some scraps of leftover meat. In contrast, their masters and mistresses feasted on lavish banquets, complete with exotic spices and expensive wines. This stark contrast in living conditions only served to further emphasize the servants' inferior status. But what about the living conditions themselves? Medieval servants often lived in cramped, poorly ventilated quarters, with little to no access to natural light. The smell of dampness and mold hung heavy in the air, making it difficult to breathe. And let's not forget the lack of sanitation. Toilets were often nothing more than holes in the ground, and bathing was a luxury few could afford. These conditions took a significant toll on the servants' health, with diseases like tuberculosis and cholera running rampant. Despite these hardships, many medieval servants found ways to cope and even find joy in their lives. For instance, servants often formed close bonds with one another, creating a sense of community and support. They also found solace in their work, taking pride in their ability to provide for their masters and mistresses. And in some cases, servants even managed to earn a modicum of respect from their employers, who recognized their value and worth. So, what can we learn from the experiences of medieval servants? For one, it's essential to appreciate the sacrifices they made and the hardships they endured. By understanding their struggles, we can develop a greater empathy for those who have come before us and those who continue to face similar challenges today. We can also learn from their resilience and resourcefulness, finding ways to apply those qualities to our own lives. As we move forward, let's not forget the importance of treating all individuals with dignity and respect. Whether you're a servant or a master, a lord or a peasant, everyone deserves to be treated with kindness and compassion. By embracing this mindset, we can create a more just and equitable society, where everyone has the opportunity to thrive. This concludes our look at life as a servant in a medieval household. Join us next time as we explore the world of medieval entertainment and the ways in which people found joy and relaxation in the midst of hardship. Section 13. Life in the castle's upper floors. As we continue our journey through the daily life of a medieval servant, let's take a closer look at what it was like to live and work in the castle's upper floors. The castle was a labyrinth of corridors, staircases, and chambers, each with its own secrets and stories. For the servants, living and working in the upper floors was a unique experience that few outsiders ever got to see. Imagine waking up every morning to the sound of the castle's chapel bells tolling in the distance. You'd quickly get dressed in the dim light of your tiny attic room, sharing the space with several other servants. The air would be thick with the smell of wood smoke, cooking oil, and dampness. It's not exactly the most appealing scent, but it was home. One of the most challenging aspects of living in the upper floors was the constant noise. With so many people moving about, it was difficult to get any rest. The sound of footsteps, chatter, and clanging pots and pans would echo through the corridors, making it hard to sleep. But, as we said earlier, servants had to be prepared to work at all hours, so it was just part of the job. Now, let's talk about the layout of the upper floors. The castle was divided into several sections, each with its own purpose. The upper floors were home to the lord's family, guests, and high-ranking officials. The floors were made of polished wood, with intricate carvings and ornate tapestries adorning the walls. It was a far cry from the cramped, drafty rooms that the servants called home. One of the most interesting things about living in the upper floors was the opportunity to see the lord's family up close. While they were certainly not as approachable as the servants, they were still human beings with their own quirks and flaws. I recall one time when the lord's wife, Lady Elizabeth, asked me to help her with her hair. I was a bit nervous, but she was kind and gentle, and we chatted like old friends. As a servant, you had to be prepared to adapt to any situation. Whether it was serving a meal, running errands, or performing a task, you had to be flexible and willing to learn. And, of course, you had to be able to keep secrets. In a medieval household, gossip was a deadly sin, and servants were often the ones who knew the most about the lord's family and their affairs. Despite the challenges, life in the upper floors had its perks. You got to see the castle's most beautiful rooms, like the Great Hall and the chapel, up close. You also got to attend special events like banquets and tournaments, which were always exciting and lively. And, of course, you got to meet people from all walks of life, from traveling merchants to visiting dignitaries. In the next section, we'll explore what it was like to be a servant in the castle's kitchen, one of the most important and busiest areas of the household. From preparing meals to managing the pantry, the kitchen was the heart of the castle, and servants who worked there had a unique perspective on life in the medieval world. Section 14. Life in the kitchen. As I continued to explore the inner workings of a medieval rich household, I found myself drawn to the bustling kitchen. This was the heart of the estate, where meals were prepared for the family and their guests. Life in the kitchen was unlike anything I'd ever experienced before. Imagine being surrounded by flames, the smell of roasting meats, and the sound of pots clanging against each other. It was a sensory overload, but one that I quickly grew to love. As a servant, my role in the kitchen was to assist the cook and help prepare meals. It was a job that required precision, attention to detail, and a willingness to get my hands dirty. One of the most challenging aspects of life in the kitchen was the early morning hours. We'd rise before dawn to start preparing breakfast, which often consisted of porridge, bread, and cheese. The cook, a gruff but kind woman named Agnes, would oversee the entire operation, ensuring that every dish was perfect. I'd assist her by chopping vegetables, stirring pots, and fetching ingredients from the pantry. Despite the early hours, life in the kitchen had its rewards. I loved watching the meals come together, seeing the transformation from raw ingredients to a delicious, satisfying meal. It was a sense of pride and accomplishment that I'd never experienced before. And, of course, there was the food itself. But, despite the hardships, I wasn't alone in my struggles. There were many others like me, servants and laborers who toiled behind the scenes to keep the household running. We were the unseen hands that made the grandeur possible, the ones who kept the fires burning, the food cooked, and the clothes clean. And yet, we were treated like nothing more than mere commodities, disposable and replaceable at a moment's notice. One of my fellow servants, a young woman named Alice, came to me one day and confided in me about her own struggles. She was tasked with cooking for the household, a job that required her to rise before dawn every day and work tirelessly until the evening meal was served. She told me about the endless hours of peeling vegetables, chopping meat and stirring pots, the constant heat and humidity of the kitchen, and the endless criticism from the cook and the master of the house. She was exhausted, both physically and mentally, and felt like she was on the verge of collapse. As I listened to Alice's story, I realized that I wasn't alone in my struggles. We were all in this together, a team of unseen servants and laborers who worked tirelessly to keep the household running. And yet, we were treated like nothing more than mere cogs in a machine, replaceable and disposable at a moment's notice. But, despite the hardships, we found ways to cope. We formed our own little communities, supporting and caring for one another in our own quiet ways. We shared stories and laughter, and found ways to make the drudgery of our work more bearable. We became a family, a makeshift family of servants and laborers who relied on each other for support and comfort. As I look back on those days, I realized that my time as a servant in a rich medieval household was a defining experience in my life. It taught me the value of hard work. In addition to these household chores, servants also had to contend with the constant smell of cooking and the noise of the household. The kitchen was often located directly below their living quarters, and the smell of roasting meats and stews wafted up through the floors, making it difficult to escape the aromas of the day. So, what can we learn from the living conditions of medieval servants? First and foremost, it's clear that these individuals were often treated as little more than commodities, rather than human beings. They were expected to work long hours, live in cramped and unsanitary conditions, and sacrifice their personal space for the benefit of their wealthy employers. Life in the kitchen was not without its challenges, however. The kitchen was a hot and humid environment, and the work was physically demanding. The servants had to work long hours, often in cramped and poorly ventilated conditions. Additionally, the kitchen was a place of danger, where burns, cuts, and other injuries were common. Despite the challenges, life in the kitchen was also a place of great camaraderie. The servants worked together as a team, relying on each other to get the job done. They developed strong bonds and friendships, which helped to make the long hours and hard work more bearable. In many ways, life in the kitchen was a microcosm of life in the larger household. The servants worked together to maintain the household standards, and they took pride in their work. They were a team, working together to ensure that the family was happy and content. As we continue our exploration of medieval household management, we'll take a look at the role of the steward, who was responsible for managing the household's finances and resources. We'll also explore the role of the lady of the house, who was responsible for overseeing the household's daily operations. But for now, let's take a moment to appreciate the hard work and dedication of the servants who worked in the kitchen, providing for the family's needs and keeping the household running smoothly. Section 18: Life in the Great Hall. As we continue our journey into the world of medieval servitude, let's step into the grandeur of the Great Hall. This was the heart of the medieval household, where meals were served, celebrations took place, and the lord and his family held court. As a servant, I would spend a significant amount of time within these walls, and I must say, it was a world unto itself. Imagine walking into a massive room with high ceilings, the smell of roasting meat and freshly baked bread wafting through the air. The sound of clinking glasses, laughter, and the occasional bellow from the Lord's table created a cacophony of noise that was both overwhelming and invigorating. As a servant, you were part of this dynamic, yet always on the periphery, observing and serving without being part of the main action. One of my fondest memories from my time as a servant was helping to prepare the great hall for a feast. The atmosphere was electric, with the other servants and I scurrying about, setting the tables, polishing the silverware, and arranging the flowers. The Lord's wife, a stern but fair woman, would oversee the preparations, ensuring that everything was perfect for the evening's festivities. As the guests began to arrive, the great hall would transform into a whirlwind of activity. Servants would scurry about, refilling cups, serving food, and clearing plates. I remember one particularly memorable evening when the king himself was in attendance. The great hall was packed, with nobles and knights vying for attention and favor. As a servant, I was tasked with ensuring that the king's cup was always full, and I must say it was a daunting task. Despite the chaos and the demands of serving the Lord and his family, there was a sense of camaraderie among the servants. We were all in this together, relying on each other to get the job done. We would often share stories and jokes, our laughter and banter providing a much-needed respite from the demands of our duties. But life in the Great Hall was not all fun and games. There were strict rules and protocols to follow, and any mistake could result in severe punishment. I remember one time when I accidentally spilled a cup of wine on the Lord's favorite cloak. The repercussions were swift and severe, with me being forced to apologize profusely and spend the rest of the evening in the kitchen, scrubbing pots and pans. Looking back, I realized that life as a servant in a medieval household was a delicate balancing act. On the one hand, there was the thrill of being part of something grand and important, of serving the Lord and his family. On the other hand, there was the constant threat of punishment and the ever-present reminder that you were nothing more than a servant, a mere cog in the machine of the household. Despite the challenges, I am grateful for the experience, and I believe that it has stayed with me to this day. As I reflect on my time as a servant, I am reminded of the importance of hard work, dedication, and loyalty. These are qualities that I try to instill in my own life, and I believe that they are essential for anyone looking to succeed in any field. In the next section, we'll be exploring the world of the castle's kitchens, where the magic of food preparation took place. From the early morning hours of baking bread to the late-night preparations for a grand feast, the kitchen was the heart of the castle, and a place where I spent many hours of my day. Join me next time as we take a peek into the world of medieval cooking. Section 19. The Dark Side of Servitude. As we delve deeper into the lives of medieval servants, it's essential to acknowledge the harsh realities they faced. Behind the scenes of grandeur and opulence, servants endured unimaginable hardships, from physical abuse to emotional manipulation. Let's explore some of the most disturbing aspects of servitude and how they impacted the lives of those who suffered. In many medieval households, servants were treated as little more than property. They were bought, sold, and traded like commodities, with no regard for their well-being or dignity. Some servants were even forced to work for years without pay, their labor being used to enrich their masters. It's a stark reminder that the concept of human rights was still in its infancy during this period. One of the most insidious forms of exploitation was the use of debt bondage. Servants who owed money to their masters could be forced to work for years to pay off their debt, often with interest rates that were exorbitant by today's standards. This created a cycle of poverty that was almost impossible to escape. Imagine being trapped in a never-ending cycle of servitude, with no hope of freedom or a better life. Physical abuse was also rampant in medieval households. Servants were often subjected to brutal treatment, including beatings, whippings, and even mutilation. Masters would use physical punishment to assert their dominance and maintain control over their servants. It's a chilling reminder that the concept of human dignity was still a distant ideal during this period. Emotional manipulation was another tool used by masters to control their servants. They would use tactics like guilt-tripping, emotional blackmail, and even gaslighting to keep their servants in line. This created a toxic environment where servants were afraid to speak out or assert themselves, lest they face severe consequences. So, what can we learn from the experiences of medieval servants? Firstly, we see the importance of recognizing the value of human dignity and rights. We must acknowledge that every individual deserves to be treated with respect, kindness, and compassion. Secondly, we learn the dangers of exploitation and abuse, and the need to protect the vulnerable from those who would seek to harm them. In conclusion, the lives of medieval servants were marked by hardship, exploitation, and abuse. As we reflect on their experiences, let's not forget the lessons we can learn from their struggles. By acknowledging the value of human dignity and rights, we can create a more just and compassionate society for all. And as we move forward, let's strive to create a world where everyone can live with dignity, respect, and freedom. This concludes our exploration of the medieval servant's life. In the final section, we'll discuss the impact of the Black Death on the medieval servant class and how it changed the course of their history. Stay tuned for the conclusion of our journey into the world of medieval servitude. Section 20. Wrapping up the life of a medieval servant. As we near the end of our journey through the life of a medieval servant, I want to take a moment to reflect on the lessons we've learned from our historical friend, Thomas. From the moment he stepped foot in the grand halls of the wealthy merchant's estate, Thomas